The Islanders are set to face the Blue Jackets for the second straight game, and we've got a special crossover episode with Jay Forster of Locked On Blue Jackets. We discuss Tuesday's game, preview tonight's game, and discuss the future of both of these teams that are going to miss the playoffs this year. All that and more coming up on this episode of the Locked On Islanders podcast.
Your Locked On Islanders, your daily podcast on the New York Islanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Blue Jackets and the Islanders faced off last night. They face off again tomorrow night, or tonight, I guess, as of the time of you guys listening to this. And so I thought we could do another Locked On crossover, or a Locked On Squadcast, as a couple of us have started calling them. So I'm here with Gil Martin of Locked On Islanders. Now, the last time we talked, just before our teams faced each other for the first time this season, it was two very different teams than the ones we saw last night, I think. The Blue Jackets have really been struggling as of late, and the Islanders, who had kind of started off the season struggling, have really picked it up. I don't think either team's going to make the playoffs, which is something we'll talk about a little bit later on, I think. But first off, how did you enjoy the game last night? I expect you had a lot more fun than I did.
Well, the first 5 minutes, I thought Columbus had the better of the play. They had the first, I think, 4 shots on goal. But then after that, the Islanders sort of took control for the rest of the first period, most of the second. It looked like the Islanders were comfortably up 4-1. And then third period, Columbus certainly had the better of the play. And the Islanders just kind of hung on. When Beauvillier took that penalty with a little more than 2.5 minutes left, I was like, oh no, not this again. The Islanders sort of have had a penchant for giving up goals in the last minute or so of periods this year. And I know Columbus has had a lot of come from behind wins and what have you. So I think Islanders Nation was sort of holding its breath, but they did manage to hold on. Good game for the Islanders for the first 2 periods, but the third period, it's like they took their foot off the gas and stopped skating. And Columbus certainly, took advantage and got back into the hockey game. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I was just looking up the shots actually just before we started recording, and I didn't realize. I think the shots in the third period are like 16-3 for Columbus, and I was like, because it felt one-sided, but sometimes I think things feel one-sided, but they're not actually that. But 16-3 is a pretty sizable gap. You say Columbus has a lot of come from behind wins, and I think that you can look at that as a good thing or a bad thing. Because if a come from behind win means they were losing for most of the game, and they've managed to find a way back into it and win the game, which could be a good thing because they won the game. But also you've got to look at why does this team need to come from behind? I think literally a third of their games this season have been come from behind wins. I think they lead the league. It's like 22 games this season have been a come from behind win. So I didn't love the game in general. The goaltending, which I want to talk about a little bit, and is probably something we're going to talk about significantly in the kind of preview to tonight's game that we do in a little bit. But I think the goaltending struggled. I think the goaltending has been struggling for a while. And I mean, there's various reasons for that, but chiefly, I don't think Elvis is 100% healthy. And I think he's playing injured. I think he's been playing injured for a significant part of the season. And I think in the off season, it's going to come out that, he needs like major surgery for something, which is stressful and not ideal. And it annoys me when everyone's like, oh, let's get to the end of the season and let's see the injury list, and then it's the playoffs and it's like, oh, so-and-so had 2 separated shoulders and a broken lung and someone else's foot fell off in the third round and he kept playing, but that is a whole other thing for a whole other podcast. I didn't hate a lot of the game last night. I thought it was I think that they had a good effort to, like you say, to try and come back. And I think there was it Patrick Laine took a penalty with like 45 seconds left. And I think, okay, that was maybe the nail in the coffin. But yeah, when you start the third period down 4-1 and then the game finishes 4-3, I think, yeah, you've got to you got to respect the effort and the tenacity, I guess, because it would have been very easy for the Blue Jackets to just kind of roll over and die, which is something we've seen them do a lot this season. So yeah, you have to kind of credit the mentality of, okay, we're down 3 goals, but we're not out yet. And also, you've got to love Vladislav Gavrikov scoring 2 goals in one game, because he's our only defenseman that actually plays defense. And that first goal, I watched it happen, and then I realized who was like where on the ice. And I believe the 3 players down low were Jack Roslovic, who is a center, fair enough, and then both defensemen were about 6 feet away from the net, and then the 2 wingers were like up on the points covering them, which was just extremely funny. But yeah, that was my personal favorite moment of the night. I think was that opening goal by Columbus.
What were your thoughts about, you didn't have your regular head coach? How, if at all, do you think that affected things? And what are the chances he's back for the game Thursday night?
I mean, Columbus is notoriously tight-lipped about injury situations or like coaching availability and stuff. It kind of came out of nowhere. I was really surprised to not see him on the bench. I think he'll probably be back, but I also wouldn't be surprised if he's not. Which, and again, that kind of causes. I think that probably is not like a cause of the loss. But when you look at like Columbus is a young team on the ice, but it's also, relatively speaking, it's a very young coaching staff as well. It's 2 guys that were AHL assistant coaches are the NHL coaching assistants now. And obviously this is Brad Larsen's first year being a head coach in the NHL. So I think it's when you take that out, you take this relatively young head coach out, you've got 2 very inexperienced assistant coaches running the show. And I think that was maybe that kind of had probably something to do with the loss, but not entirely to do with the loss. But yeah, it was, I don't know, it was a tough game to watch, I think. It was very, like you say, that penalty with Beauvillier at the end, where you were kind of like, oh no, this obviously this is how it ends. Like, is that something that you've seen a lot from the Islanders this season? Obviously, you said that they allow a lot of goals in the final period, but in terms of, and I feel like I've seen a lot of talk about Beauvillier taking needless penalties this season. Is that something that you think has started to become a pattern? Is that a team thing? Is that a Beauvillier thing?
The Islanders have given up a lot of goals in the last minute and a half of periods all season. And it's a momentum killer a lot of the time, especially if it happens, you're playing well in the first period, you're up 2-0 through, 19 minutes, and then you give up a goal in the last minute of the period. The momentum shifts. They come out in the second period, and the other team has the momentum and sort of takes over the tone and the pace of the game, and you're on your heels to start the second. It has hurt this team a lot. And lately, Beauvillier a little bit, he's taken some foolish penalties, but the guy who was in the box a lot for the Islanders lately, and it happened again last night, Casey Cizikas. And on Twitter, it was like fans were saying to me, oh, Cizikas is back home. He's in the penalty box again, and that's unusual because, Casey Cizikas, yeah, he's on the 4th line, but he's not a dirty player. He usually is, physical but clean. And he's taken a lot of penalties in the last month, mostly because I think he stopped moving his feet, and all of a sudden, things that in the past would have been just a forecheck or a body check end up being a hook because he's not moving his feet, and they're, being very observant about hooking and that kind of a thing lately. So I don't know. They take a lot of foolish penalties and they give up those last minute goals, and it's a momentum killer. And it has hurt the Islanders over the course of the season. There's no question about that.
Yeah, the Blue Jackets are really in the same boat, I think. I've been joking a lot this season about how the Blue Jackets have taken a lot of penalties this season because they're like, well, we're not afraid of the head coach anymore. Obviously, with Tortorella gone, I think there's not that fear of if they make a mistake or if they take a dumb penalty, they're going to get stapled to the bench. So I've been joking about how they've been getting, 4 years of ice crime out of their system and have just taken a bunch of penalties. And the Blue Jackets also allow a lot of goals in the last minutes of periods, first minutes of periods and last minutes of periods. That's when the Blue Jackets love to allow goals. But these two teams seem really similar, like on a base level and also kind of an underlying level. Apart from, I think are the Islanders still the oldest team?
Yeah,
in the league.
Yeah. If not, they're very close. I believe their average age.
Zdeno Chara is bumping that average way up, I think.
Yes.
But the youngest team versus the oldest team. But we're gonna talk about something else that they have in common in just a minute, and we're gonna talk about missing the playoffs for the Blue Jackets for the second year in a row, and for the Islanders, is this their first year missing?
First year, they made it the last 3 years, so yeah.
Yeah, so it'll be an early summer finish for both teams, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute. First, I've got to tell you about BetOnline, because after months of playing, college basketball has finally determined the top teams for the Final Four and will determine this year's national champion this coming week. And if you want to put some money on that, then betonline.net is the place to go for it. It is your number one source for all your betting needs and sport information, and from all the latest odds, contests, and player props. They remain the best spot for all of your latest sports developments. They've got podcasts, reviews for all of the leagues this season, and it's not just basketball. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting and wagering information needs, including live betting, your favorite Vegas casino games. They've got baseball, they've got basketball, they've got hockey, they've got UFC, they've got boxing. The Frozen Four is coming up if you pay attention to NCAA hockey. You can put money on that if you wanted to. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action of all of those things, because BetOnline is where the game starts. So, I didn't think the Blue Jackets were going to make the playoffs this season. I don't think anyone did. The Islanders' play this season has been a little bit more of a surprise, I think. Maybe, I don't know if it's a surprise to people who are kind of more in touch with the team, but I have always seen the Islanders as the better of the two New York teams, and they seem to have kind of flipped this season. So where do you think the Islanders are in terms of getting back to the playoffs? Is this just a random down year? Like, I remember Tampa Bay had that one year where they missed the playoffs, I think in 2014 or 15, and then got a really good draft pick from it, and then have kind of, soared to the top of the league. Is that kind of your thinking where the Islanders are, or is it a case of, okay, this is kind of the start of, is this the beginning of the end, basically?
I don't
think something much less melodramatic,
Yeah, no, I don't think it's quite the beginning of the end. There is still talent on this team. This was a rough season. A lot of weird things all happened at the same time, especially in November and early December. They started the season with a 13-game road trip because their new arena wasn't ready yet. Then they had COVID hit the team where they were minus 8 players. That's half your roster. They only had one of their top 6 defense. Excuse me. One of their top 6 defensemen available for 5 or 6 games in a row in November. They went 0-8-3. Then they come home to the new arena, but there's no home ice advantage because they're not familiar with it. And then one of their top 2 defensemen ends up, supposed to be out 4 to 6 weeks, ends up being 8 weeks. You add all of that together, and it was just impossible to overcome the 0-8-3 late November, early December swoon. The other thing is, I think the Islanders, 2 years ago, they traded Devon Taves. This past year, they traded Nick Leddy. That's 2 puck-moving defensemen. Who did they replace those 2 with? Zdeno Chara. Now, Zdeno Chara is still a decent defensive defenseman, but at the age of 44 or 45, he's not skating the puck out of his own zone and starting the rush. He is not the transitional player that Nick Leddy was a year ago. So they only have one defenseman who's really adept at moving the puck in their top six, and that's Noah Dobson. And Dobson, while he's playing very well lately, he's still learning the NHL game. This was a sort of a breakout year for him. So I think that those factors really caused the Islanders to stumble early in the year. Since everybody's gotten healthy again, they have been playing better hockey, let's say the last 2 months since I would say the Christmas holiday break. But by then they were, too far out of the playoff picture to really get back into it. And, they went, I believe it was 8-1-1 in their last 10, but Washington also went 8-1-1. So they didn't gain any ground. And it's very hard with the loser point in the NHL to make up a double-digit deficit in points in the standings. So if they make the right moves, this team, I think in the offseason, they need to get a puck-moving defenseman, and they need to get a 30-plus goal scorer. If they add those two things, they can be right back to the team that made the conference final the last 2 years and maybe even go further than that. How about the Jackets? Where do you see them in their development? You mentioned they're the youngest team in the league. So, how far away are they in your mind from playoff contention?
Yeah, it seems really weird to say, considering where they are in the standings, they are, I think they hold the last spot just outside of the wild card spot. So fifth in the Metro Division at the minute. And it seems weird to say this, but the only way from here, I think, is up. I don't see this team getting worse unless Jarmo Kekalainen just fully loses his mind in the offseason. But, basically it's, and again, sounding melodramatic, it's gotten as bad as it was going to get for the Blue Jackets, I think. Losing your captain, Nick Foligno, losing your number one defenseman, Seth Jones, losing a former 40-goal scorer in Cam Atkinson. 2 years ago, we lost future number one center, Pierre-Luc Dubois, and we've picked up some really good pieces in return. Obviously, Patrick Laine is ruining lives out here. I think he's got 50-something points in 45 games. He missed 2 months with an injury, and that does suck because I wonder what his season would have been like if he hadn't been injured. But that's kind of beside the point. The Blue Jackets are going to be a better team next season than they are this season. I think they're gonna get guys like probably Kent Johnson. I think is going to come, former 5th overall pick. They're probably going to get Kirill Marchenko over from Russia, who's very, very highly recommended or regarded. They probably are. They don't have Mike Domi's contract anymore, so that's $5 million in cap space. I don't think they have any big contracts that they need to sign in the off season. There's really only there's Patrick Laine, but he's already making 7.5. So I imagine I would be surprised if he gets more than a couple of million a year raise, which is easy to fit into this cap situation as it is, So the Blue Jackets are doing all of the right things. They are trending in the right direction. It's just it's very strange because I think they overachieved this season. I wasn't necessarily expecting them to be in the basement of the league with the Arizonas, but I would not at all have been surprised if they had challenged for that first overall pick. And I mean they're still in the running for that, I guess. But to wrap up my very long-winded and convoluted answer, the Blue Jackets, I don't necessarily know they make the playoffs next season, but I think they are better next season. I think if the goaltending can stay healthy, because that really has been the problem for the goalies, which I think we're going to talk about in a minute when we look at tonight's game. If we had been able to keep one of our goaltenders healthy for more than a month at a time this season, I think it probably the team's record would look a lot different. I don't think Korpisalo is here next season. I think Korpisalo goes in unrestricted free agency. So if we can find a reliable backup for Elvis that can play maybe 20, 30 games a season, give Elvis the bulk of the work, and Elvis can kind of find his groove that he had at the start of the season, then I think the Blue Jackets are in a really good place.
Definitely an up and coming team. Are you concerned he's been overworked? I mean, especially lately, with the goaltending injuries and everything else that's been going on.
Oh yeah, 100%. I was already suspicious that he wasn't fully healthy. He left a game a couple of weeks ago. I think it was against St. Louis. He left with like 13 minutes left in the period. Apparently his back locked up when he made a save. And like now that I am kind of on the brink of 30, I understand what it's like to have back pain basically every day of my life, you know. So and then Korpisalo played, I think, one game after that, maybe one or two games after that, and then the team shut him down for the season with a hip injury. He's getting hip surgery, which worries me a little bit because he's the second goalie in the organization to undergo season-ending hip surgery this year, which makes me worry that there's a fundamental issue with the goalie coaching staff that's causing these kind of injuries. But anyway, so they shut Korpisalo down, and I was like, well, obviously Elvis is coming back now. Like, they're not going to shut both of their goalies down. They probably should. Like, the season's lost at this point. Like, what do we gain apart from ruining our draft stock by going on a hot streak for the end of March and the start of April? So that's worrying and also annoying. And yeah, I do think Elvis is being overworked. I think we probably see him tonight. I wouldn't be surprised if he played tonight. I would like them to play Berube tonight because again, what have they got to lose? But the fact that they played Elvis in both halves of a back-to-back this past weekend, team lost both games, but like, and I get that he's your starting goaltender, but I don't understand this insistence on starting a guy who is not 100%, 2 games in the space of like 28 hours or whatever it is, when the playoffs are not on the line, you know? Like, if you don't want to shut him down for the season, fine, but I feel like I worry that they're going to do more harm than good at this point.
Yeah, you don't want him to get more seriously injured, that's for sure.
Exactly. But I think that's what we're going to talk about in a minute, actually. We'll take a look at tonight's game. We'll look at what the Islanders need to continue doing, what the Blue Jackets need to do better. That is all coming up next on this crossover edition of Locked On Blue Jackets and Locked On Islanders. And so, yeah, I feel like this is like the third or fourth time this season that the Blue Jackets have played the same team back to back in the space of like 2 or 3 days. So at least they'll be familiar with each other. But what do you want to see from the Islanders tonight? Is there anything that they didn't have on Tuesday that you want to see from them? What aspects of the game from Tuesday do you want to see them carry into tonight?
Well, I mean, the way they played in the first 2 periods was solid. And, we have some very hot players offensively right now in Brock Nelson and Anders Lee, especially. Those two have been really playing their best hockey, I would say, over the last 3 weeks or so. And that's something the Islanders need. The one problem the Islanders have offensively, there aren't enough guys who like to shoot the puck on this team. Beauvillier, Barzal, these are, good offensive players, but they pass first. Josh Bailey, same thing. So finally getting Nelson and Lee healthy and shooting and scoring consistently has been a big plus for the Islanders. I want to see more of some of the younger players, your Kiefer Bellows, your Oliver Wahlstroms. I would like to see them get some more ice time because same as the Blue Jackets, the Islanders are not going to make the playoffs barring a real miracle at this point. Obviously, I'm assuming because it's not a back-to-back that Semyon Varlamov will be in goal unless Ilya Sorokin is miraculously healthy. They don't really want to play Corey Schneider, who was the backup last night. And more importantly, from an Islanders perspective, they can't let up like they did in the third period, where it looked like the Islanders were standing still and the Blue Jackets were skating circles around them. They can't be chasing the puck in their own zone for 15 minutes out of a 20-minute period. That is not a formula for success, especially when you've got, your Patrick Laines on the other side of the ice, taking those kind of shots with regularity. And so, those are some of the things they need to do differently, and got to cut down on the overall shots against. You can't allow 45 shots in a game and hope to win too many of them. You're really relying on your goalie too much. And, the Islanders often do allow shots on goal, but they tend to be from the perimeter or from further away. Last night, too many of them were from down low. So that's something that needs correcting as well. How about for you? What do you see the Blue Jackets needing to do differently? And what did you like that you want to carry over?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to see more of the third period. Honestly, I would like to see just a consistent 60 minutes together at this point. I think that's been the Blue Jackets' problem all season, has been they've had periods, or even they've had 2 periods, 2.5 periods, where it has been, oh, everything is clicking. This is what this team should be doing. And then they've got, a period they fall apart, like against the Penguins earlier last week. They played a really good first and third periods, and then in the second period they allowed 4 goals. So, if they could just put together 3 good periods at once, I think I would be happy with that at this point. Consistency is key. I would like to see, again, we've talked about this, I want the goaltending to be better, but I don't know how that's possible at the minute, because we've talked about, Elvis is clearly not 100%. So I think it's unfair to point at him and say this is the reason the team is losing. He has to be better, because I think it's going to come out in the offseason that he has some kind of debilitating back thing that is that was hindering him all season. So maybe they start Berube. Berube had tremendous success earlier in the year when they were forced to play him, when both goalies were ill. He went, I think, 3-1 in his 4 games and had a save percent. I think he had a save percentage of like .930 in those games. So maybe we see Berube and he does another kind of magical performance like he did earlier in the season, but I don't think that's worth betting on. So I guess maybe, yeah, goaltending I would like to be better. Less playing, how do I want to phrase this? So they had 45 shots on goal, and 3 of them went in. Obviously that's partially due to impressive goaltending from the Islanders, but you've got to be scoring more than that. And it's you've got Patrick Laine he's been on fire, and it's so frustrating again to see him pass the puck. And there was a really good post-game quote from him about the first Gavrikov goal, where someone asked if he was shooting that puck for the rebound, and he was like, "No, I don't shoot for rebounds. I shoot to score." And that's exactly what. So it's Patrick Laine I think he's slowed down in terms of scoring goals. He's been racking up assists pretty frequently over the past couple of weeks. If he can turn his goal scoring back on, then I think it's a completely different team when Patrick Laine is scoring goals. I would love to see Oliver Bjorkstrand play exactly the same game as he did on Tuesday tonight, because again, I feel like he is, and I've been banging this drum for 3 years now, he's one of the most underrated forwards in this league, I think. No one talks about him, and then you look and he's got 25 goals this season. That's a hard thing to do in this league, and he does it basically without any help. So, I would like to see him have a really good game again. I thought he was one of the bright spots in Tuesday's game. But apart from that, I think maybe just don't go down 4-1. I know they almost pulled off the comeback, but I would like the Blue Jackets to win a game where they did not have to come from behind.
Little details, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Should be a good one tonight. Should be a good one tonight.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully, like I say, hopefully it is more fun for me than Tuesday's game was. Before we finish up, I am going to ask you, because I feel like I asked you this last time. and neither of us got it right. Final score and game-winning goal scorer. What is your prediction?
I'll go with Islanders 3, Blue Jackets 2, and I'll go with Anders Lee for the game winner. How about you?
I'm going to say, I think the Blue Jackets bounce back. I'm going to say 4-2 Blue Jackets, but I think there's an empty netter in there, so basically 3-2. And I think game-winning goal scorer, let's go with... Let's have fun. Let's go with Cole Sillinger for the game winner. But that is all from us. If Blue Jackets fans want to catch up on the Islanders, check in on that team before tonight's game, where can they find you and your show?
Well, it's Locked On Islanders, wherever you get podcasts. And then you could follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Isles, and you could follow me on Twitter at Ice Wars NYR VS NYI. How about you?
I cannot in good conscience recommend paying attention to the Blue Jackets at this point in the season, but if you would like to, you can find me over at _Jacob Forster, JAKOB FORSTER. If you're watching on YouTube, then it is down at the bottom here. If you would like to know how to spell it, because my name is a nightmare to spell, you can find Locked On Blue Jackets wherever you get Locked On Islanders. We are at LO_Blue Jackets on Twitter. Before we finish off, thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We really appreciate it. Whether you are a first-time listener or a regular listener, Locked On Blue Jackets and Locked On Islanders is free and available on all podcast platforms and also on YouTube. And until tomorrow, make sure you stay locked on.
All right, that's going to do it for this special episode of Locked On Islanders and Locked On Blue Jackets. Want to thank Jay Forster of Locked On Blue Jackets for joining us and sharing his insight. Thanks for making Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Hosts Steele Roden and Flip Livingstone help you become the expert of your fantasy league. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. We'll be back tomorrow to preview the weekend's action, including another game against the Rangers Friday night. And we'll have our Islanders birthday today and hopefully some updates on the health of Ilya Sorokin. All that and more coming up on tomorrow's show. Until then, stay safe. Have a great day, everybody. And of course, let's go Islanders.